What are the best and worst case scenarios for the Rangers' likely fourth line of Jimmy Vesey, Nick Bonino, and Tyler Pitlick? We debate this and more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 884 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so, going to continue our fun-filled offseason series here today with the best and worst case scenario. We started by covering the goalies. We worked our way to the left defenseman, the right defenseman. Now we work our way to the forwards, and most specifically, the fourth line. Going to work our way up the depth chart as we go. Part of the reason we're doing it somewhat backwards this year, Alexis Lafreniere still does not have a contract. Obviously, that's something we're going to monitor on Locked On New York Rangers. But hopefully by the time we get to the top line, Lafreniere is signed and ready to go. But that's then. This is now. We're going to focus on the fourth line, and we're going to start. We'll go left to right. We'll start with who I believe will be the Rangers' fourth line left wing player on opening night, and that is Jimmy Vesey, now in his second tenure with the New York Rangers. Played in 81 games last year with the Blueshirts, 11 goals, 14 assists, 25 points, a career best plus 13. That's actually only the second time in his career that he's been a plus as far as plus minus is concerned. Part of that obviously is due to the fact that he hasn't played on a lot of great teams over the last few years. But regardless, career best plus minus for Vesey, averaged 13 minutes, 37 seconds of ice time per night, had 40 blocked shots, 98 hits, 56 takeaways against 29 giveaways. And as far as his contract is concerned, he signed that 2-year extension right in the middle of last season. So this is the first year of those 2 years, and he will make $800,000 per season, just a shade over the minimum of $775K per season. So worst case scenario for Jimmy Vesey. And anybody that might be new to this, we start with the worst case scenarios. We work our way to the best case scenarios. Always good to be glass half full and end on the good stuff. So that's what we're going to continue to do here today with Jimmy Vesey, as well as the other two players on the fourth line. I'd say in a worst case scenario for Jimmy Vesey, we could see some regression to him going back to the player that he was, where he basically struggled to keep a job for the handful of seasons that he left the Rangers after the first go around with the Rangers. Bounce around from Buffalo to Toronto to I feel like I'm forgetting one, that the Devils the year before he came back to the Rangers. But look, Jimmy Vesey, when he was drafted by the Rangers, was near the beginning of the third round of the 2012 draft and a fairly highly touted player, somebody that had an outstanding college career, won a Hobie Baker Award. But as far as point production is concerned, it just hasn't really translated to the NHL level. The tenure, the portion of his NHL career where he was producing the most offensively was actually, once again, that first stint with the Rangers when he was here for 3 seasons, ends up being traded. And just never became the offensive player that I think a lot of people were expecting him to be, and actually just turned 30 this offseason. So, for all those reasons, I don't see him going on to be like this phenomenal offensive player. I am happy he's still here, though. As far as, this idea that he could regress back to the player that he was between his 2 Ranger stints, I certainly think it's possible. Obviously, I don't want it to happen, but this is somebody that for 2 straight off seasons, clearly he did not do enough to impress enough people around the NHL, because 2 straight off seasons, he had to settle for PTOs, had a PTO with the Devils, made their team, had a PTO with the Devils the Rangers this past season, and obviously made the Rangers, was rewarded for his strong play with that 2-year extension. He just sounded relieved and so happy to know where he's going to be for the next 2 seasons going forward here, even if it wasn't for a ton of money. He's got some long-term stability, and that's obviously a good thing, or it would seem to be something that Jimmy Vesey was looking for. But there's no guarantees as far as him playing at the level he did last year. And again, not like he was a superstar last year, but to me, somebody very useful. You can move him around the lineup. I think he's best suited for the fourth line. But we saw him, play left wing, play right wing, move up, move down, left, right, back, forward. Didn't matter. Jimmy Vesey went out there and found a way to play pretty solid hockey. Somebody that's basically reinvented himself over the last couple of seasons here. I think also in a worst case scenario, we could be looking at a situation where, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said, but we could be looking at a situation where we get next to no offense from Jimmy Vesey. You can live with a lack of offensive production from a fourth liner. I mean, to begin with, they're not going to get as much ice time as obviously the guys in the top 9. They're not going to be out there on the power play, except for maybe some very rare exceptions to that rule. But for the most part, fourth liners not going to be out there on the power play. And as a result of that, not getting ice time, not being on the power play, and just not being probably the most skilled players on your roster, they're not going to end up with a ton of points. Last year, though, and again, he did move around quite a bit, but he ends up with 25 points. You hope that he can do something that's kind of on par with that, give you a little bit of depth scoring, a little bit of secondary scoring. But when you look at what he did just before he came to the Rangers the last couple of seasons, his only year with the Devils, 68 games, only 15 points. And then the year that he split between the Leafs and the Canucks, and that's the other team that he played for. I couldn't come up with that a second ago, but it was the Leafs and the Canucks. The Canucks were the team I couldn't think of. He had just 10 points in 50 games. So his offensive production, while never great with the Rangers in his first go-around, really fell off a cliff, and he did next to nothing, offensively for all those teams I just mentioned before picking it back up a little bit for the Rangers. But in a worst case, next to no offense from Jimmy Vesey, the former Hobey Baker Award winner. On to best case scenario. I think in a best case, Jimmy Vesey plays with some edge. I can remember, watching, obviously, the playoff series this past year between the Rangers and the Devils, and I want to say it was like game 4. I was watching with my dad, and he mentioned that I wish everybody on this team right now was giving as much effort as Jimmy Vesey, and that was true. The Rangers, for one reason or another, at times in that series, just looked like they weren't into it, looked like they were skating in quicksand. Jimmy Vesey was out there giving pretty consistent effort, didn't really do anything as far as scoring is concerned, but was at least working hard, fighting for the puck, playing in all 3 zones, getting in there on the forecheck a little bit, so skating hard. So obviously doing some things to help the Rangers there, in that playoff series, or as much as he could do for a series that got away from the Rangers pretty quickly there. But yeah, Jimmy Vesey does play with some edge. He does have some feistiness to his game. We saw him get into a couple of fights last year. There was one against the Bruins. Trouba hit somebody, clean hit. They all went after Trouba. Jimmy Vesey jumped in there. Next thing you know, Jimmy Vesey drops the gloves, and he's in a fist fight. But he got into a couple scraps last season, and just one of those players, and you could see it the first time around with the Rangers too, just not going to take any you-know-what from anybody out there. And I like that. You need players that play with some feistiness and a little bit of edge to their game as well. I think also in a best-case scenario for Jimmy Vesey, and I alluded to this just a second ago, but he can continue to be something of a Swiss Army knife for the New York Rangers. Now, I do like him personally. Probably as a fourth liner, definitely, a bottom sixer. If you are in a situation where you need a shakeup or somebody's not getting the job done in the top 6, I think he can help out there in a pinch. We saw last year he got a decent amount of run on the top line with Mika and Kreider. Did all right there. I thought him and Panarin, when he was on the Panarin line, and it was Panarin, Trocheck, and Vesey, I thought him and Panarin, seemed to be on the same page, and a couple of nice passes between the two of them. So it's something you can always go back to from time to time. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Vesey, while playing with Panarin on the Panarin line, it's not something that I want to happen. I just think the Rangers have better options there, but it's not the craziest thing either. Jimmy Vesey could basically, if he's there, play the role that Jesper Foss used to play on that Artemi Panarin line. Somewhat similar skill sets between Foss and Vesey. Both can go in and kind of do some of the dirty work, and it obviously worked for Panarin when Foss was on that line with him. So, it's not the craziest thing, the idea of having Vesey there, but again, I do think there are some better options. But regardless, wherever he ends up on opening night, wherever he goes, bounces around the lineup as the season continues, it's nice knowing that you have somebody that can do that can play left wing, play right wing, play with any 2 line mates, move up and down the lineup on an as-needed basis. And in a best case scenario, Jimmy Vesey continues to be that player for the New York Rangers. I think also in a best case scenario, and I think this is something that will happen, Jimmy Vesey takes nothing for granted and earns his spot in the lineup every single night. This is something that he's very used to having to do, especially over the past 2 seasons. I mentioned the PTO with the Devils, followed by a PTO with the Rangers. Had to make both teams, was able to do so. I remember Vesey in the preseason last year. He really stood out in a positive way, and it's not that surprising because a lot of the established veterans, whether it's the Rangers or whichever team they're playing, they're not going to be going all out in the preseason, but Jimmy Vesey had to. He had to make the team, played very well, made the team, and played in 81 of the 82 games this past season. But yeah, I mean, I think in a best case scenario, you get more of what we got last season from Jimmy Vesey, the guy that doesn't assume anything is just going to be handed to him, the guy that goes out there and earns a spot in the lineup every single night. Because I'll be honest, even after Vesey made the Rangers this past season, I didn't think for a second that he would end up playing in 81 of the 82 games. There was one game somewhat early in the year where he was a healthy scratch, but that was it. He was out there every single night after that. And, I think part of that is he went out there and earned it with his play, and he'll have to do the same thing all over again this upcoming season. That's kind of the life of a fourth liner. But, I was really happy with what Vesey gave the Rangers last year, and hoping that he can go out and continue to earn his keep every single night. I think also in a best case scenario, got to mention penalty killing. We know just how big penalty killing in general can be, especially in the playoffs. Rangers last season were 13th in the league in penalty kill at 81.2%, which is not terrible by any means. But I think between having Igor Shesterkin as your goalie, having the defenseman that the Rangers have, and having a lot of strong penalty killing forwards, Vesey among them, you should be a little bit better than that. And Vesey is one of those guys that might be able to help out the Rangers in that department, the penalty killing department, certainly in the regular season, but then again, even more so in the playoffs, because it's the penalty killing in the playoffs. You cannot understate just how important that is. Ideally, you stay out of the box, but nobody's going to not take any penalties, so you got to be able to kill it off if you're in that situation. And I mentioned this when we talked about Adam Fox in our best and worst case scenarios. How about a little Harvard connection action? I don't remember if that happened at all last season, but maybe Fox to Vesey for a goal, or even Vesey to Fox for a goal. Just want to kind of end on a fun one there for Jimmy Vesey. We're keeping everything rolling just a second here. We're going to turn our attention. We're going to move across the line to the right to Nick Bonino, who is expected to be the center. At least I think he'll be the center of the fourth line when the season begins. We will get to that in just a second. First, though, we do have to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I drink Athletic Greens literally every day. I gave it a shot because I wanted to see what all the hype was about, and I actually wanted a supplement that tasted great. So I drink it every morning. I've been on it for about 16, 17 months, give or take at this point. I start my day every single day with Athletic Greens. I drink it before I record Locked On Rangers. I drink it before the day job. I drink it before I do anything active. It's just a great way to start your day, Make sure that you're feeling sharp and alert for the day ahead of you. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. AG1 helps you build your health foundation first. All great athletes have one thing in common. They take care of their bodies, and a huge part of that starts with optimizing whole body health. A lot of them also drink AG1, and that's part of the reason why I'm also a huge fan. With every daily serving, I'm setting myself up for success with 75 high-quality ingredients that give me daily nutrients and support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. It's a micro habit that delivers macro benefits and helps just about everybody take care of their health every single day. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1/NHL Network and check it out. All right, we just want to go ahead. Thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. For the everydayers, definitely going to want to stick around. We're going to continue with this offseason series of best case and worst case scenario. Going to be monitoring the Alexis Lafreniere contract situation. Also going to be lining up for some guests for you guys in the near future here. But for right now, let's continue focusing on the fourth line for the Rangers. And we're going to move to center, which I think in all likelihood, that's going to be Nick Bonino, free agent pickup for the New York Rangers this offseason. As far as what he did last year, 62 games total last season, 59 with the Sharks, and then 3 with the Penguins. 10 goals, 9 assists, 19 points in 62 games, which is not too shabby for a fourth liner, although I'm not sure that he played exclusively on the fourth line with the Sharks. They weren't a great team. And so, I don't know if he ever crept up on the depth chart more than the fourth line. Maybe we'll talk to JD from Locked On Sharks about that at some point. But regardless, he was a -5, averaged 15 minutes, 55 seconds of ice time, 48.2% success rate on the faceoff, 79 block shots, 19 hits, 40 takeaways against 17 giveaways. And then once again, this offseason, signing a 1-year, $800,000 deal with the New York Rangers. Now, as far as worst case scenarios for Nick Bonino, the first thing that popped into my head is probably the first thing that popped into your heads quite a bit as well. And that is, of course, the age. Nick Bonino, 35 years old at this point, and once somebody starts to get into their mid-30s, certainly their late 30s, and they're a pro athlete, you do start to wonder about that a little bit. You at least have some concerns, some reservations as a fan of the team. And, with the Rangers right now, if you're a Ranger fan, I think the two guys, maybe three even, that you're looking at and maybe being a little bit concerned about that would be Bonino, Blake Wheeler, and also Jonathan Quick. We're kind of just hoping that, especially in the case of Bonino and Wheeler, since they're going to be out there every night, Quick is not, you just really keep your fingers crossed and hope that their game doesn't fall off of a cliff. I'm not too worried about it with Bonino, though, because a lot of the things that he does won't really slump. He plays a certain gritty style of hockey. He's a good defensive forward. As long as he can keep up with the play, he'll be okay. He kills penalties, and, maybe on the penalty kill, obviously there's a little bit more ground to cover, and maybe he's not as quick to, move around the ice as he used to be. So, I guess, there's at least some concern there, but overall, I think it'll be all right. And if you are worried about the age, the good news here is the Rangers, they didn't sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal in his mid-30s here. He is on a 1 year deal. So it should be just fine. That should alleviate some concerns from Ranger fans. I think also in a worst case scenario, the fourth line, which is a revamped fourth line for the Rangers. Obviously, Vesey's back from last year, but two new guys with Bonino and Pitlick. And I don't believe they've ever been teammates, any two of them up until this season. But in a worst case scenario, the fourth line just doesn't have chemistry. And this isn't just Bonino. You could say this for any of all three of them, but, Bonino's going to be the center. I feel like he's going to be kind of the de facto leader of that fourth line. And so, yeah, in a worst case scenario, they just can't quite figure it out. But I'm not too worried about that either. You talk about chemistry, and a lot of times you're talking about like scoring chemistry. The fourth line, anything they give you offensively is just a bonus. As long as those guys can go out there, play a gritty brand of hockey, get in there on the forecheck, do all the little things, I think all three players will be lined up for some penalty kill time as well. Everything should be just fine. So those are the worst case scenarios. Now, the best case scenarios for Nick Bonino. I think in a best case scenario for Bonino, he becomes sort of like a second tier leader on this team. And what I mean by that is obviously the Rangers have a lot of holdovers from the leadership group. You've got Trouba still the captain, Panarin, Mika, Kreider, and Goodrow. They were all alternates last year. They're all back. They're all going to be in that role. They're not going to make Nick Bonino the captain next season. I doubt very much they would make him an alternate captain, although it is worth mentioning that Bonino was an alternate captain for David Quinn with the Sharks this past season. But yeah, they're not going to like take the A away from Artemi Panarin and give it to Nick Bonino. It's just not even worth it from a PR standpoint, and all the questions that would raise. But I do think Bonino, I don't think he's going to have a letter on his sweater, but regardless, I do think he's somebody that could be kind of a leader, like I said, a second tier leader in that locker room, where he's kind of the de facto leader of, the fourth line, the line that he's on, maybe even the bottom six in general. Barclay Goodrow is part of that bottom six. Maybe the two of them kind of share those duties. But he's somebody that is a well-respected veteran, and I think will command respect when he walks into that locker room, and somebody that knows how to get it done in the playoffs. We talked about this too. The Rangers have more Stanley Cups in their locker room right now than they've had in a long time. Quick's got 3, Goodrow's got 2, and Nick Bonino's got 2. So, yeah, somebody who's been there and done that, knows what it takes to get it done in the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if, if there's a situation where he needs to speak up, that he'll be able to do that. I think also in a best case scenario for Nick Bonino, he remains somebody that you want on the ice late in games, somebody that you could trust, somebody that's just very reliable in spots like that. And we talked about this with Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins. Hunter obviously does a great job with his show, and Nick Bonino, his first stint there, 2 years, they won the Stanley Cup both seasons, and Hunter could not have spoken any more highly of Bonino than he did. Obviously he felt like Bonino was a huge part, especially of that first of the 2 Stanley Cups that they won when Bonino was there. But also, according to Hunter, Bonino is that guy. You can have him out there, very defensively responsible, somebody that, if your team's up by a goal late in a game, I always think of like playoff situations here, but really any regular season game, you're up by a goal, you got to protect this lead. Who do we want out there? Nick Bonino is somebody that you can rely on in a spot like that. So that's good. And hopefully in a perfect situation, in a best case scenario, Nick Bonino continues to be that type of a player for the New York Rangers. Something else that I think is big, and the everydayers, man, you guys are going to know that I'm big on this, and that's faceoffs. Now, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and I can't remember. I want to say it was like 2007, 2008, the last time that the Rangers won more than half of their faceoffs. And unfortunately, that streak continued this past season. The Rangers were 20th in the league last year, winning 49.1% of their faceoffs. And I do think Nick Bonino will help in that department. Now, as far as his career is concerned, Bonino is slightly below 50% success rate on the faceoff circle, right below it, 49.9%. But if you look at his past 6 seasons and combine them all, Bonino has won 52.2% of his faceoffs. So it's clearly an area where he's worked hard to get better, and he's certainly improved throughout the season, or throughout the seasons that have gone by here. But yeah, I feel like the Rangers are getting better in that department. Mika should be around 50%. Trocheck's very good for his career, 52.6%. And yeah, Bonino, again, somebody that can go out there, win a faceoff for you. Maybe there's a situation late in games where he's taking the faceoff to win the faceoff, obviously, but then he's also out there for defense. Like I said, somebody that use him the right way, and Nick Bonino can be an important player to this team. Not going to be a superstar. I think we all know that, but somebody that can certainly contribute a lot of different things. I'm going to also say in a best case scenario, man, give me another clutch Nick Bonino playoff goal. I didn't really enjoy it so much when he was doing it for the Penguins. That wasn't really a lot of fun, but and he's older now and he doesn't score as much as he used to. But honestly, if Nick Bonino scored a big goal for the Rangers in a playoff game, would you really be that surprised given his track record and just given the very nature of hockey, the fact that anybody can be a hero any given night? You get to a playoff overtime game and, the game keeps going and going. Obviously, you're going to go with your top guys early in the overtime period. But if the overtime goes deep, if you go into a second overtime, a third overtime, everybody's going to have to play. And we know anybody can be a hero on any given night. He does have a knack for those clutch goals. We talked about this with Hunter once again from Locked On Penguins. There was the goal that he scored, Penguin Sharks in the final. It was with like 2:30 left in game one. That gave them the win, the game one win there. And also, he scored in overtime against the Capitals in a game 6 and eliminated them. And again, just a playoff performer in general. So Nick Bonino scoring a big goal in a playoff game for the Rangers would not only not surprise me, you know what? I'm expecting it. Let's get a big-time clutch Nick Bonino goal for this upcoming season here. Going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Want to conclude our episode by moving to the right wing of the fourth line, and that's going to be another new Ranger. That's going to be Tyler Pitlick, and we will talk about him and what he brings to the table, best case and worst case scenarios, in just a second. All right, Tyler Pitlick. So last season, obviously he's a journeyman, spent last season with the Blues, 61 games there, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points. 16 points is actually the third highest total of his career, and it's the most he's had since 2019-2020. In that season, he had 20 points with the Flyers. He also averaged last season 10 minutes, 5 seconds of ice time, so he plays very sparingly. 29 block shots, 103 hits. That's also the third most of his career and the most since his year with the Flyers. 19 takeaways last season against 6 giveaways. And he is now with the New York Rangers on a 1-year deal worth $787,500. So once again, just a shade over the minimum. And the New York Rangers are his 8th team. So Tyler Pitlick, very much the definition of a journeyman, one of those guys that's basically on a new roster every season, or in some cases, he's on multiple teams in the same season if he gets moved at the deadline or whatever the case might be. But we'll go ahead. Worst case scenario for Tyler Pitlick. I think in an absolute worst case for Pitlick, he gets off to a bad start with his new team. Now, on one hand, based on what I just said, all the different teams he's played for, he should be used to it by now, right? Bouncing around the league and never getting too comfortable in the same city or the same fan base or whatever it might be. But I do think, in general, everybody that's on a new team, you always want to get off to a good start. You always want to impress your teammates, make a good impression on the fan base. Just hit the ground running and start contributing right away. But I think a bad start by Pitlick would be especially bad for him because, with Ranger fans, I include myself in this, we're always looking at the prospects. How soon are we away from seeing this guy play? And what does he bring to the table? Could he make the opening night roster? When will the Rangers call him up? And the Rangers do have a couple of guys that fit that description, namely the two that really jump out, Will Cooley and Brandon Offman. And I just feel like if the Rangers struggle in general, or if the fourth line struggles, or if Tyler Pitlick struggles, I just feel like, Ranger fans, they're already going to want to see these prospects, make their debut, or in Cooley's case, get another chance with the Rangers. But that'll increase tenfold if Tyler Pitlick is struggling, not keeping up with the play, just not really contributing in any meaningful kind of a way, that's where Ranger fans are really going to be clamoring for these prospects to get a chance with the Rangers. And I just feel like Tyler Pitlick right now, yeah, to me, he's in the opening night roster, but I think he is very clear-cut the 12th of the 12 forwards. Like if somebody's going to come out of the lineup as a healthy scratch early in the season, I feel like it'll probably be Tyler Pitlick. So worst case scenario, he gets off to a bad start. He's shaky. Those calls for, some of the prospects to play, they'll get louder and louder, and Pitlick's going to be hearing it a little bit. So Tyler Pitlick, it's imperative for him to get off to at least a decent start. Again, we're not expecting superstar production from any of these fourth line players, but we're expecting competent play for Tyler Pitlick and for him to be the player that he's always been. And I'll talk more in detail about the player he's been in just a couple of seconds here. I think also in a worst case scenario for Tyler Pitlick, he's just not able to stay in the lineup on a nightly basis. He ends up kind of being the odd man out from time to time, and that kind of ties in with what I just talked about there. But, as I mentioned, I just feel like if somebody on this Ranger team, if one of these forwards ends up getting squeezed out of the lineup, either in the early goings of the season, later in the season, or maybe the Rangers make a trade at some point, I feel like Tyler Pitlick is going to be kind of the odd man out. And it might not even be one of the prospects. I'm mentioning Cooley and Hoffman here. I mean, they brought in Alex Belzile. We'll see if he gets a chance with the Rangers. Somebody like Johnny Brodzinski, who we know kind of bounces between the NHL and the AHL. Maybe he's in the mix at some point as well. But yeah, Tyler Pitlick, I really do feel like he's kind of got his work cut out for him to maintain his spot in the lineup night in and night out. He can do it. I mean, if he hits the ground running and plays strong hockey and doesn't give the Rangers a chance or a choice or any real reason to take him out, then, he might be somebody that sticks in the lineup. We shall see there. But it is going to be a battle for him to do that. Best case scenario for Tyler Pitlick, he basically plays the role of the new Tyler Mott. Now, obviously, they share a first name, but there's also some similarities beyond that. These are guys who both can kill penalties, known as defense first forwards. Both have, decent, if not really like elite speed. They both can move fairly quickly out there. Just energy players, guys that go out there, give it their all, kind of pesky players as well. And I think in a best case scenario, and Tyler Mott's still out there, so never say never as far as a reunion is concerned with the New York Rangers. But given the cap space and the lay of the land right now as far as the Ranger depth chart, it just doesn't seem like something that's all that likely to happen. But I think, if the Rangers do move on from Mott's playing somewhere else next season, then I think Tyler Pitlick is somebody that they have in mind to kind of play that role for this next season at least. I think also in a best case scenario, Tyler Pitlick is a valuable member of the penalty kill. And again, the Rangers, as we've talked about, they have no shortage of options when it comes to their penalty kill. I do wonder if at a certain point, maybe not even necessarily this season, but going forward, I'm wondering if maybe Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider, you'll see their penalty kill time kind of get scaled back a little bit. It's not like these guys are ancient. Mika just turned 30 years old. Kreider a little bit older. He's 32. But I do wonder if at a certain point, sooner or later, whether it's this season, seasons to come, if the Rangers decide to kind of lighten their load on the penalty kill a little bit, the two of them, they're both on the top line. I mean, Mika's always on the top line, and Kreider's there more often than not. So they're obviously going to get big time minutes. They're two of the best players on the Rangers. You would expect nothing different. So they'll play a ton of 5v5. They'll also be huge staples of the power play as well. I'm just wondering if at a certain point they start to see that the penalty kill as a way to give them a little bit of a breather, not have them out there for every single PK that the Rangers face. And a way to do that is to get some strong penalty killing contributions from guys like Tyler Pitlick, guys like Nick Bonino, guys like Jimmy Vesey, whoever it might be that you want out there on the PK. Goodrow can play some PK. So we'll see. But again, I think in a best case scenario, Tyler Pitlick is somebody that you see as being very reliable on the penalty kill and somebody that you feel comfortable maybe scaling back Mika and Kreider a little bit. I'm not saying Mika and Kreider can never or should never play on the PK, but it's food for thought. I do wonder if at a certain point you'll start to see a little bit less of them when it comes to penalty killing. I think also in a best case scenario, Tyler Pitlick brings a little bit of speed to the table. My understanding, talking to different people and, reading articles about Tyler Pitlick from all the different teams he's been on, different beat writers have written different articles, obviously. My understanding is that, he's not a speed demon. You're not going to see him in like the NHL skills competition this year out there for fastest skater or anything along those lines, but certainly an above average player as it pertains to speed. And, I know there's some concern from Ranger fans that they lack speed a little bit outside of like Kreider and Hedl as far as the forwards are concerned. And, it's funny because I've talked about this before too. I don't see the Rangers as like an overly fast team. I don't really see them as a slow team either, though. Guys Blake Wheeler's probably not going to be very fast anymore because he's getting up there. But besides that, the top 9, and if Goodrow's going to be in the top 9, you can throw him in there as well. Other than Wheeler and Goodrow, though, is there anybody on the ice that's like slow as it pertains to, how fast they can move out there? I don't really see it, but it is nice that Tyler Pitlick can give you a little bit of speed, on the bottom part of your lineup as well. You think of fourth liners, you think of like enforcers and grinders and guys that are doing all the dirty work, and Pitlick can do some dirty work as well, but nice that he can bring a little bit of speed to the table as well. I figure we could pretty much call it there for today. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that's lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. And for anybody that wants to play fantasy hockey, definitely email me or DM me. We're going to be moving forward with that pretty soon. Definitely looking forward to playing once again this season. Once again, thank you guys as always for tuning in to Locked On New York Ranger podcast, your team every day. And I will see you next time.